Well, what's up, everybody? How you guys doing today? Excited to be in church? Yes, maybe? There we go. There we go. Well, we are so excited to have you. As Pastor Mark said, my name is Abby, and I do want to take a moment and just give a big welcome to all of our JFam joining us online and at our Hockessin location this morning. We're so excited to have you as part of our Journey family, and as you've heard, it is Connect Weekend. So one more time, I'd love if all of you, Newark, Hockessin Online, could help me give it up for everybody leading a J group this summer. Let's give it up for our J group leaders. You guys are the real MVPs, all right? And so no matter who you are, no matter where you're at in your faith, we all need some other people to do life with. And that's what our J groups are all about. I hope you take the opportunity this weekend to sign up for a group to get connected. And fun fact, I was thinking about this heading into this weekend. My very first J group was with Pastor Mark. He was my J group leader, and we had a group of young leaders, and our J group name was Leadership Under 35. And so I would joke for years. I was like, it was a long time ago because Pastor Mark was under 35 when the group happened. But now I'm super close to 35. So the joke does not feel quite as funny anymore. But when I think about that group, I was brand new to my faith, and getting around a couple of other people who were going the same direction spiritually really was a catalyst for me, and I believe that it can be for you as well. And so as you heard, we are in a series called Starter Kit, which is all about developing the tools that we need to grow our faith. And if you missed the series kickoff next weekend, you're going to want to take just a little bit of time this week, watch Pastor Mark's message online. Such a great reminder about temptation and testing, but how we endure all of that, how we can grow. And this weekend, it's not going to get much easier than talking about temptation, because we are going to be talking about the one thing that we all do, but nobody wants to admit to, and that is judging other people. How many of you judge other people? Just kidding. Do not? Okay, well, we got some really honest people at Newark. You're going to get your chance for crowd participation. I did not think it was going to be that one this early anyway. So how many of you would admit to judging somebody, maybe just in your head, for something that they were wearing? Come on. All right. Now you're not being honest. There we go. Some of you, especially you guys out there, I know half the time you don't even pay attention to what your wife or your girlfriend are wearing, and then the times you do pay attention, you're wise enough not to say anything. You're just like, that. I don't understand what that half shirt dress situation is, but it looks great, right? That's the right answer. It looks great. And I am not going to admit to judging other people for what they wear, at least not publicly, but I will admit to judging myself for some past fashion choices. How many of you look back on pictures and you are like, what was I thinking? Yes. What was I thinking? Recently, my mom was cleaning out my childhood bedroom, so she thought it'd be a good idea to bring all of that junk to my house, for me to go through. And I was going through all of these old pictures, and I just could not stop thinking, what was I thinking? I was looking at a dress from my junior high prom, and it was electric blue, bedazzled, with a corset. Not a good look, all right? Not a good look. I went through a phase in high school where I would only wear polos with the collars popped and matching headbands. I went through a phase, probably the worst of all. I found a picture. So I went to Catholic school growing up, but when we would have Catholic school dances, you didn't have to wear your uniform. So that was your time. You can show off. And I guess I decided the best thing I had to offer was a pair of hand-me-down red pleather pants. Yeah, and I was just rocking, like the world was my runway when I was walking around in these red pleather pants. And I look back now and I just think, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? But when I really kind of stop and pause, I realized that beneath that confident attitude that I was trying to project to the world was just somebody who desperately wanted to fit in. Somebody who did not want to be judged. And chances are you've had that experience too. We've probably all had an experience where we become very aware of what we are not. When someone else gets that promotion, or when you finally ask her out and she says no, when your parents always seem to give more attention to your younger sibling. And what starts to happen is that so often when we see ourselves for what we're not, we start to see the other people around us for what they're not. as well. We compare, we make quick judgments of other people based on what we see or what we don't see, and that's kind of just how our brains are wired. We can't process all the information that's coming to us at one time, so we make these quick judgments. We start to have these stereotypes, and this idea of making judgments is not a new phenomenon. It is something that has existed since humans became humans a very long time ago. And it's what we're going to unpack a little bit more today. What we're going to look at is some scripture written by a guy named James, who is actually Jesus' half-brother. So we can all agree, not an easy job, right? Not an easy job in that family. And this is what he writes. This is James chapter 2. He says, "My dear brothers and sisters, how can you claim to have faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ if you favor some people over others? For example, suppose someone comes into your meeting dressed in fancy clothes and expensive jewelry, and another comes in who's poor and dressed in dirty clothes. If you give special attention and a good seat to the rich person, but you say to the poor one, 'You can sit over there or else sit on the floor,' well, doesn't this discrimination show that your judgments are guided by evil motives?" So, how many of you in here are parents who have more than one kid? Okay, more than one kid. Parents, Hockessin, okay, parents more than one kid, all right. Keep your hand up if you have a favorite kid. Okay. So you're not supposed to raise your hand for that. Because all of us who are parents, like we know, we all have a favorite kid, but you can't admit to having a favorite kid. All of us who have a sibling knows that there's always a favorite in the family. I was the oldest. So I think we can all agree it's always the youngest. The youngest is always the favorite. And this is the idea that James is talking about here. We can relate to this idea of playing favorites. And we enjoy the idea of playing favorites when we're the favorite, but we hate that idea when we are not the favorite. And if you're here today and you're not quite sure what you believe about God or Jesus, that's totally okay, and you can actually take a pass on this. Because James makes it clear right up front that he is speaking to those of us who would consider ourselves followers of Jesus. And if we consider ourselves followers of Jesus, then we got to realize that James is calling us out here. He's calling us out. He knows that many of us are used to walking into a room and casting judgment based on what a person looks like or sounds like or their perceived socioeconomic status. But he says, hey, no, that may be how it works in the world around us, but that's not how it works in this family, not in the family of faith. And many of us who are gathering this weekend, no matter what we believe about God, we would probably all agree it is not a good idea to judge other people. Now, we may do it silently in our head, but we know that's not the right thing to do. But this idea that judging other people isn't okay is actually a fairly new phenomenon in our culture. At the time that James is writing, it wasn't like that at all. In their culture, they had a very strong survival of the fittest mentality. And so wealth and being rich and prestige was the thing that was valued over everything and everyone else. And if you did not have that, that culture would demean you. And that's how everybody thought. But it's a much different cultural tendency today, due in large part to the influence of Christianity on our society over the last 2,000 plus years. And so you've got to realize that as James is writing to this group of people, he is offering them a brand new perspective that's so different than the one that they were used to. It is not based on who's worthy or not worthy in the eyes of the world. He says, hey, we've got a new system. Our system is called faith, and faith demands that we don't play favorites. That's not how it works in this family. The world around us may love other people based on feelings, but as followers of Jesus, we love people around us based only on faith. Think about it. We don't forgive other people because we feel like it or we think they deserve it. No, we forgive other people because God forgave us first. We don't love other people based on whether or not we think they deserve it. No, we love other people around us because God loved us first so much that he sent his son, Jesus. For all of us who are followers of Jesus, we have to have a new perspective. That's what James is urging us to do. And he continues like this in verse 5. He says, listen to me, dear brothers and sisters. Hasn't God chosen the poor in this world to be rich in faith? Aren't they the ones who will inherit the kingdom that he promised to those who love him. So since our church began, right over 16 years ago, we have had a big heart for helping those near us who need us. And this desire is not just based on a feeling, it's based on our faith. We serve a Jesus who served the people around him, the people who were undervalued, underprivileged, underlooked. And so we serve people in our region the same way so that we follow his example. And here at The Journey, we call it Code Red. It's missions and outreach, our heart to helping people around us. And a couple of years ago, we identified food insecurity as one of the biggest issues in this region. And so as a church, when I say we, I mean all of you. Through your generosity, we're able to build a food distribution center at the back of our Newark location, and we do monthly food distributions. And so about a year or so ago, I was serving with my J group at one of those monthly food distributions. And they're a drive-through event. So people come up to our location and they stop at different places along the way. We're there to greet them and we give them fresh produce and food. And I was at the very last stop right before they left. And so my role was to invite them to church, gave them an invite card. And I got to ask each person, hey, how can I pray for you this week? And it truly was a humbling experience because these were people, for many of them, who clearly had a physical need. And I had written a story in my head. I just assumed they were going to ask for prayer for themselves. I probably would. Figured they were going to ask for prayer for a new job or financial situation or some other type of resource. But I was there for over an hour, and I don't think a single one of them asked for prayer for themselves. Every one of them asked me to pray for somebody else. And it was such a humbling experience that day because I realized that I was only seeing their circumstance. And there was a much bigger story. They weren't just focused on their struggle. No, they were able to see the people around them. And I think that's so key. It speaks volumes about what faith really means because faith sees God's story, not simply someone's circumstance. So I want us to ask ourselves this weekend, what do we see? When you walk into a room, what do you see? And then what do you assume? When you see somebody's hand-me-down clothing or beat-up car, what do you assume? When you see somebody's designer handbag and luxury SUV, what do you assume? When you see a worn-down single parent yelling at her son, what do you assume? When you see the perfect put-together Pinterest mom yelling at her son, what do you assume? I have to realize that it is not a sin to see someone's situation. Oftentimes that's just a reality, but it can become sin when we refuse to see past their circumstance into the bigger story that God is writing in their lives. And so James continues like this. He says, yes, indeed, it is good when you obey the royal law as found in the scriptures. Love your neighbor as yourself. Many of us have heard this. It's called the golden rule. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. I've got 2 little boys, and I use this all the time. I'm like, do you think your brother would have wanted to be punched in the head? No, is the answer. Often, yes is the answer, but the right answer is no, right? I'm like, you didn't like it when he punched you, so you don't punch him. We know this from a very early age. We have to treat others the way that we want to be treated because there is a story behind every circumstance. Think about it. You may have that friend who seems to never text you back, and you're so frustrated and annoyed, but the truth is she's so deep in a depression that when she sees that text, how are you? She can't even bring herself to respond. You may have a boss at work who you think is a huge jerk because he snapped at you in front of your coworkers, but what you don't know is that he is under immense pressure from his boss who told him that if he didn't hit this deadline, he was getting fired, and this job is the only way he provides for his family. Some of you who are students in here, you get frustrated at your parents because you keep asking them for money for that thing that you really want, that trip that you really want to go on, and they keep telling you no. But what you don't know is that they leave and they feel crushed because they desperately want to say yes, but they can't seem to make ends meet. There's a story behind every circumstance. Broken people doing their best to navigate this broken world. And faith reminds us to see God's story, not simply someone's circumstance. So what do you see and what do you assume about other people and about yourself? Because maybe for some of us this weekend, we don't struggle all that much with judging other people, but if we're really honest, we spend a lot of time judging ourselves. And that's judgment too. You see your own circumstances, your addiction, your failures, your shortcomings, your shame, your weak mental health, and that's all you can see. Your life feels like it's consumed by your own less than ideal circumstances, and you feel so deep in your own struggles that you couldn't even get out to see the struggles of the people around you. And I have been there. I've had those moments where the number one person I'm judging is me. To just never, it feels like just never quite enough, never patient enough, never fast enough, never smart enough, never talented enough, never kind enough, never strong enough. And chances are you maybe had that moment too. But we have to realize that not enough feeling is only part of the story, because God shows us a much bigger story, and we cannot rely on our feelings to know what that story is really like. Think about it. Our feelings tell us, hey, you will never be enough. But faith has already told us that we can do all things through Christ, who gives us strength. Our feelings say, hey, you're always going to feel this way, but our faith says something different. Our faith says, hey, I have plans for you, plans that are good, plans that will give you a hope. Our feelings try to tell us, hey, you have to give up. You're not cut out for it. You can't do this. But our faith says, forget the past. Look ahead. Press on to the heavenly prize for what God has for you, because we cannot live our lives based on our feelings. That's a product of something that is happening in the moment. It's a circumstance, but God is writing a bigger story. So the question is, how do we do this? How do we strengthen our faith when we just want to give into those feelings of judging other people or judging ourselves? Well, we have to make a commitment to connect with God personally and with God's people. We connect with God personally when we practice a slot and a spot, a time and a place in our day. When we read the Bible and pray, we remind ourselves of who God is, how much He loves us, how He wants us to treat ourselves and the people around us. We talked about this last weekend, but as a church right now, we're going through the book of James together. You can get on our Journey app and click that link and follow along to make a commitment every day to read God's word. And I love that simple routine of coming close to God in that way. But if you're anything like me, sometimes you just need reinforcements. And that's where God's people come in. That's what J groups are all about, helping you find some other people to do life with, to help remind you of who God really is, how much He loves you, people who will celebrate you when you hit a milestone, people who can grieve with you when you're going through something difficult, people who can remind you that God is not judging you just based on your past. He is always doing something new, and He can do something new through you. But we've got to put ourselves in a position to get around God's people, because it is people of faith who help us see God's story, not simply our circumstances. It can be a great gift. We have to become these people. And James continues like this. He says, but if you favor some people over others, you are committing a sin. You're guilty of breaking the law. For the person who keeps all the laws except one is as guilty as a person who's broken all of God's laws. For the same God who said, you must not commit adultery, also said, you must not murder. So if you murder someone, but you do not commit adultery, you have still broken the law. Okay, take yourself back. Remember when I told you it was going to get uncomfortable? Adultery, murder, guilt, shame. I mean, James is really going for it here. This is some heavy stuff. And just like before, James is telling us, hey, we can't play favorites when it comes to people, and we can't play favorites when it comes to sin. He's really trying to break it down, and sin simply is anything that we think, say, or do that misses the mark of God's best for us. And if we're honest, it is often easier to see other people's sin other than our own. And it's what I like to call our selective sin standards. Now, it's church. You guys probably don't do it. This is sometimes what I do. We think some sin is here, and the sin of like our crazy brother-in-law is always like way up here, right? And where does our sin hang out? Our sin doesn't hang out here. Our sin doesn't hang out here. Usually our sin hangs out down here, where we think it's selective. We're like, yeah, not great, but it's not that big of a deal. And we start to have these kind of selective standards of sin. And James is making it really clear. He says, hey, sin is sin. And all sin separates us from God. He says you can't be selective about the way that you see people, and we can't be selective about the way that we see sin. There's no standard grading system for sin except for one, and that's God's standard system. He gives us a glimpse of what God's system is like. He finishes like this. He says, so whatever you say or whatever you do, remember that you will be judged by the law that sets you free. There will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others. But if you have been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you. So in other words, there is one who can judge, but it's not us. It's God. It is God in his perfection. It is God in his holiness. And for some of us, the story that we've heard about God is short and simple. We have heard God is a judge who is full of wrath and vengeance and is just out to get us. But that is only part of the story. The whole story of God is that he is perfect. Yes, he's holy, he's blameless, he's pure. He is everything that sin is not. And God can't stand our sin. But that doesn't mean that he can't stand us. He loves us. He made a way for us to get out of that sin. It's why he sent Jesus. He sent Jesus because he knew there was a bigger story for every single one of us, no matter who we are, no matter where we came from, no matter what we've done or we haven't done. There's a bigger story if we choose to say yes to the picture that God has for our lives. And as I was thinking about this weekend and thinking about this idea of pictures, I thought about in high school, I had my first Cool Pics camera. Now, this is not it. My Cool Pics was hot pink. Anybody else? Anybody ever have a Cool Pics camera? No? Okay. We've got like 15-year-olds in the front. They don't even know what this is. So I got a Cool Pics camera, all right? And I loved my Cool Pics camera because, again, this will be news to some of you who are young, but you could not always just take a picture and instantly see what it looked like. You used to have to wait, yeah. You would get film. You know, if you're anything like me, you'd take a whole roll of film, and then you would beg your parents to drive you to Walmart so you could do 1 hour photo processing. If you were feeling really confident, you would get doubles on the spot, like you were just trusting these are going to be good pictures, right? And you just wait, and you had to hope that something would turn out. But who wants to do that? Who wants to wait? Who wants to take a chance? Who wants to get some bad pictures in with the good? Once I got my Cool Pics camera, I could instantly decide whether it was a good picture or not, right? Just take a pic. I was 16. Obviously, I was just taking pictures of me all the time. And, instantly, I'd be like, don't like my hair in that one. Double chin in that one. Delete. And right away, I could decide whether or not I wanted to keep that picture. And no matter what we believe about God, chances are that we would love to be selective about the story of our lives. We'd love to just have the highlight reel, to know instantly how it's all going to turn out, to not have to wait. And we all have parts of our lives that we're proud of, parts that we want other people to see. But the truth is that there are lots of other parts of our lives that we'd rather just delete. And I'm not just talking about an unfortunate-looking photo. There are painful parts of our lives, the trauma that we've had to endure, the abuse that we inflicted on somebody else, the embarrassment of a child who just can't seem to stay out of trouble, the depths of our own depression, feeling so abandoned by a parent who left us. Those are incredibly painful experiences that we don't want to have captured on the photo reel of our lives. But they are also part of the story that God is writing in us. The story that God writes in us is a lot bigger than just some of our highlight reels. Our life doesn't work like this. Our life works a lot more like this, an old school camera that requires film. It's so much heavier than the other one. I forget that every time I pick it up. But our lives are a lot more like this. They have highlights and lowlights and everything in between. And there are parts of our lives that are going to take a long time to process because God is doing something that we can't yet see in our story. We just see a circumstance, but God sees more inside of us. And we cannot always choose what those circumstances are, but we can choose to have faith in the midst of them, to trust in the bigger story that God is writing, because that's what faith does. Faith sees God's story, not simply someone's circumstance. So church, this weekend, I want you to ask yourself, when you see your summer playing out, what do you see? You see beach trips, vacation time, summer barbecues, an awkward family photo on the beach where everybody's dressed in white because your mom made you do it. It's always the mom. Always the mom. Just smile, okay? Just once. Give it to her. But maybe a better question, instead of what do you see, is who do you see in your life this summer? What if this summer was not just about what you were going to do, but who you were going to do it with? What if you got around a few other people that didn't just have to see the highlight reel of your life? People who could see past the circumstance and into the bigger story that God is writing for you. That's what getting in a J group this summer is all about. Now, here's what I know. For many of you, you're sitting there right now and you're thinking about all the reasons that you can't join a J group this summer. You don't have to raise your hand. I know you, all right? I know you've got excuses. Some of you, you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, well, I already have friends. Why would I join a group? I already have friends. And I'm sure that's true. I'm sure your friends are great. But my question is, do you have friends who can see past your circumstances? Friends who are going the same direction spiritually, who can help spur you on to the bigger story that God is writing in your life? Maybe for some of you, you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, I hear you about joining a group, but I'm busy, right? You're busy. I get it. You're busy. I'm busy. Your mom is busy. Literally everybody in this room is busy. We're all busy. And busy really is a circumstance because faith asks us to prioritize people over productivity. So the question is, this summer, will we do it? That's why we've worked so hard over the last couple of weeks to offer over 165 groups. There's one that's going to fit into your schedule, but maybe for you, you're thinking, okay, all right, but listen, I'm going on vacation. I'm going to be away. I'm going to miss group. So the good news is we planned for that too, all right? We planned for that too. We know it's summertime. That's why we have quite a few what we call anytime groups, which means they don't even meet at a particular time, so you can connect on your own schedule. And many of our J groups this summer are going to be going through YouVersion Bible reading plans together. So even when you're away, you can stay connected to other people. And maybe for some of you, you're like, all right, I hear it, but you still have some excuses. Maybe for you, you're like, all right, I tried your J group thing one time, and there was somebody who was super weird. Nervous laughter, because we've all been there, right? Sometimes, listen, I told you some of the stuff that I wore in high school. Chances are I've showed up to a J group, and I was the weird one. People were looking at me like, what is she wearing? And I get that. It can be hard sometimes when we're like, okay, well, that's the experience that I had. But listen, don't judge your future experiences against your past ones. Give it another try. Get connected to God's people this summer. Sign up. Take that step. And some of you are sitting there and thinking, we still have some opportunities to lead a group this summer. It's not too late to lead a group. And I know you've got some excuses for why you can't lead a group either. Maybe for you feel intimidated. You feel like you're not sure how you pray in front of other people, or you don't know all the answers to everything in the Bible, or you're busy, or you're going on vacation, or maybe a weird person's going to sign up for your group. But I want to encourage you. You don't have to have all the answers to lead a group this summer. if you have a desire to just get around some other people, to help them see past their circumstances and into the bigger story that God is writing, say yes. Take that step. Register your group this week, because chances are you think you're going to lead that group for them, but God's going to do something in your life too. He's going to help you see past the circumstance and into the bigger story that he's writing in your life, that you have something to offer the people around you. So church, let's see past just our circumstances this summer. Because when God looks at you, this is what he sees. He sees someone who is chosen, who is loved, who is redeemed. He sees every mistake as part of a bigger story. He sees beyond your current circumstance, and he sees you. He sees a story that he is still writing. And if you needed that reminder this weekend that God is still doing something in you, more than just your circumstances, a greater story that he's writing in you, would you just raise your hand? All of our locations, I'd love to pray over us this weekend. God, we come into your presence. And we thank you so much that you are a God who sees past our circumstance. You're a God who is writing a bigger story in every single one of us. And God, I pray for the people gathering this weekend, those of us that feel let down by a circumstance, those of us that feel frustrated, discouraged, overwhelmed, out of hope. God, I pray that you would allow this weekend to be a reminder. We are more than just a circumstance. You are writing a bigger story in our lives. And God, I pray that part of that story this summer would be us getting connected in community with people who love you and people who want to seek you and help us seek you more. As we all just kind of stay in this moment together, maybe for some of you, you're here today and you know what it's like to feel judged by other people or by yourself. And we talked a little bit earlier today about how God does judge our sin, but only because that sin separates us from him. And he does not want us to live separated from him. He wants us to live in relationship with him. And it's why all along he was writing a bigger story for our lives, a story that included giving up his son so that when we believe in him, we can be made right with God. I was reading this week in the Bible, in the book of Romans, this verse I wanted to share with you. I think it makes it so clear. He says, if you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is by believing in your heart that you're made right with God, and it is by openly declaring your faith that you are saved. So if you're here this weekend and you've never made Jesus leader and Lord of your life, it's this simple. You don't have to do anything else except simply declare with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord. And if you're ready to write a new story this weekend, you're ready to take that step, it would be my honor to lead you in a prayer this weekend. I want to encourage all of us, stay focused on God together. And if that's you, you're ready to make Jesus leader and Lord of your life. Pray this with me. God, I come to you. I no longer want to sit in my sin and my shame. In fact, I offer it right now in this moment to you. I declare with my mouth, I believe in my heart that Jesus Christ is Lord. And he's not just a Lord, he's my Lord. He's my Lord. He's my leader. I invite him into my heart today. And in this moment, if you just made that decision, you put your faith in Jesus, would you just raise your hand? Every location, if you're online, you can just type faith in the chat. And Journey, will you help me celebrate everybody writing a new story this weekend, putting their faith in Jesus?